Hi, I'm Nicola Atkinson, known as Nadfly, and the questions I've been asked to answer would be, how do you define social practice or social engaged practice? I feel that this is actually could be all art forms in a sense. There is a kind of notion of focusing on the idea of social engaged practice, but all art forms in the sense of aspires to engage and socially kind of evoke and provoke things. So there is a kind of focus in terms of a study of that, so people would study it more often in relationship to kind of understanding it. As an artist, I very much came into doing work that was out with the gallery structure naturally, and sometimes I suppose the example would be, which is kind of a strange example, is that like hairdressers, people who are hairdressers like to cut hair, but they also have to, in a sense, want to spend time smelling people and engaging with people in a certain way. So you don't just need to have the desire, the technical desire to want to engage in a relationship with people, but you also have to, there's another aspect to it. So social, in a sense, and engaged and practice is a thing where you're actually very much close up and thinking about people. But most art forms, as I say, from singing to film, etc., is a way of communicating and engaging with the public. I suppose one would say my recent project that I've been working on is called Odd Numbers in Glasgow. And that is a project that has involved me creating 365 stoneware creatures made by myself in Sweden. And the idea is that people would take those creatures and adopt them, become caretakers of them for about 2 weeks. And then they give them back, and then we bury them and make them into a kind of future archaeological site. Part of it is for people to want to take them and to engage with them. So back to the social engaged aspect of it, you have to create things that people want, in a sense, covet and want to have. So I suppose that would be a definition of a lot of art forms. You want something that actually people want to engage with and covet. So that could be, there's also painting or other forms in a sense. With this, it's quite interesting. I created these creatures that were tiny little ceramic creatures, and part of it is that a lot of them didn't want to return them potentially, but I used the example of the idea if I gave you an apple, then wanted it back, and if I created something else from it, like a pie, you might want to give it back to me. So the project was to do with possession, and not things being possessed, but they are possessing them, in a sense they actually have these creatures, they name them, they are their, those are theirs, but they become buried. They don't have them in their lives, but they, in a sense, they have them in their lives, but they are not with them, like knickknacks, in a sense. But all of this is, I suppose, playing that out in relationship to the other question, the challenges of making the work that uses the mechanism of the person as part of the project, is letting it play out. I think that's a very important part of the process. What happens is you have a construct that is an idea. So with Odd Numbers, I had the idea that I would create 365 creatures. I would ask people to adopt them, and then we would bury them. Then obviously then people would say, maybe you shouldn't bury them because they're so lovely, or can I buy them? You can't buy them. So you have to, you're in a sense like I would describe myself as an artist, which kind of sounds slightly strange, but like the captain of a ship with a whole bunch of people, and I have a direction. I have the ship, and I'm going a certain direction. But obviously I have the sea and all the different elements of all the crew and the construct, and sometimes things change within that. But as a captain, I am there directing that, in a sense. So the challenge sometimes with social engaged practice or practice that involves people is everyone has ideas of what they would like to do with the premise that you set up. And sometimes you can decide whether or not to follow that forward or not. But letting it play out is quite magical. And for me, I've been doing this stuff for a long time, and I'm always constantly surprised and moved. And that's the thing, back to the hairdresser's example. You have to really love and enjoy people and have a kind of humanity about yourself to do this stuff, because it's social, it's engaging with people. And if you don't necessarily if you don't like that sort of process, or you don't understand that, or you don't have that in yourself, then you might find it difficult to do that. Or you might create work that is different, or doubt about your separation from others and stuff like that. Or you may want to just do a piece that's about that and show it in a gallery per se. But for me, I have a natural love, in a sort of way, it sounds funny, a love and an enjoyment of just people engaging. And with this process of these creatures, I made them. And first of all, it was very hard to let go of them, because each one had a little individual soul, and I put something in them. But then the mechanism is now they don't have any value in that for me. They have more value that someone will want them. And the next value, that they will be buried altogether, and they will become a kind of future place, a future site. A lot of the work I do, it's very complex. This project was sponsored by the University of Western Scotland, and it was a study about poverty and art. So I had a researcher and all those people engaged in that. But I found that quite difficult, because I really felt it was important not to do with the funding, but also the idea that, for example, you get funding and you have people who fund it, so then you have to kind of enable them to have access to the project. But I felt that it was important that they didn't over-research it, so because the magic would disappear. The idea that potentially the person would be experiencing the project, then the researcher would come along and say, how is it for you? These are also probably problems, or parts of the problems of having things funded, is you have the people who fund it want to, in a sense, then note it down and sort of evaluate it. But as an artist, even though you get the funding, you have to let it play its own self through, and also protect the process, the original process of the project. So the researcher is now is doing a piece about me being not wanting to be researched, which is quite funny. And the last part of the question, which is quite interesting, is what's the future of this sort of work? I think it just naturally evolves, now it's being studied, it has obviously its own history, and so it will reflect back to other things, so that will be part of its evolution. For me, I naturally came to it just as an artist wanting to do stuff out with, and I once ran a thing called the Bulkhead Prize, and part of it was to get people to think of things out with a kind of gallery context. There was no category, no structure to it, but the first year we did, we had basically the people who won and, got chosen, and the next year the people who actually applied reflected on the previous year, but it was still the same brief. Anything you want, it just had to be socially outside of a gallery context, potentially, or it could just be like someone's belly button, you just had to indicate where it was. So it's interesting how artists actually note and reflect historically with sort of work, and I'm always interested in seeing what if there's no brief, how it can evolve. Of course, with socially engaged practice as such, it is to do with a place, and in a sense it could be site-specific, or it's responding to something. But sometimes it's not responding to a particular place, it's putting a premise onto a place that is quite curious together.